All right. Okay, I'm going to wait a few seconds here. Hi, everybody. Just want to give people a chance to kind of file in and get situated. We are elated that you're here at another WGF Library Script Breakdown. My name is Lauren O'Connor.
And I'm Javier Barrios, and Lauren and I are librarians at the Writers Guild Foundation Library. We hope that you know about the WGF Library, but in case you don't, we're located in the WGA West building in Los Angeles, and we provide access to thousands of scripts and other screenwriting materials.
And you don't have to be a WGA member to use the library. We are open to the public. All you need is an appointment. And we'll make sure Dustin's on here somewhere. Oh, there he goes. He just tossed it into the chat, the link where you can make an appointment. And I'm just going to add for this event, we've been collecting donations for the Entertainment Community Fund, formerly the Actors Fund, to support those in the industry who have been impacted by the Southern California wildfires. So if you donated when RSVPing, thank you. Thank you so much. If you would still like to support this fundraiser, there's another link that's soon going to be in the chat, and you can donate there.
Now, if you've never watched a WGF's library script breakdown before, this is how it works. Lauren and I sit down with a writer on Zoom, and we go through the script with pages on screen, and we talk about their process and certain scenes and how they wrote them.
And for this breakdown, honestly, before this movie was even made, we wanted this guest to join us. So you may know her from her writing on shows like 30 Something and Once and Again, or perhaps for creating My So-Called Life. But it's Wicked that we're here to talk about today. Our guest wrote the stage musical Wicked with composer-lyricist Stephen Schwartz, then adapted that monster hit for the screen with Dana Fox. It's that screenplay, Wicked Part 1, we'll be taking a deep dive into today. So please, everybody at home, join us in giving a huge, we do ASL welcomes now for Winnie Holzman. We're so excited that you're here.
Yeah. I love being here.
Yeah.
So basically our plan now is to use the remainder of 90 minutes or maybe a little more to come through the script and talk about it. Please know up front that we rarely have time for Q&A. I'm sorry, because the script breakdowns, there's just so much to cover in the script.
Mm-hmm. But no, please know, if you're joining us, we really appreciate you. And please stay engaged in the chat, your observations, your sharing of resources. That's what all of this is all about. And one final thing, after asking a few kind of introductory questions, we're going to put script pages on screen. But if you want to follow along on your own with the script, we're going to link to where it's on Universal's award site, and you can follow along with the full script there.
Right. So that's enough about us. Winnie, welcome. Welcome again. Hi, welcome. So before we dive into the script, we'd like to ask a couple of context questions just to get us going. Lauren, my colleague Lauren, knows pretty much everything there is to know about musical theater, and I know absolutely nothing. So for those of us who know nothing, what is the job of a book writer for a stage musical? And in your role as a book writer, what did you see as your major contribution to Wicked on stage?
Well, a lot of people don't know what a book writer does, and a book writer doesn't do one thing. And also, as you can imagine, I mean, everyone. I'm assuming that a lot of people, maybe everyone in this audience, is a writer. So we know as writers that every collaboration has its own unique tone, vibe. And so there isn't a rule because a lot of it's going to depend on who you're collaborating with. But there are some things I can point to. It's a big, important part of book writing, obviously, that you're going to write dialogue, but it's so much more than that, because it's really about finding the structure. In my case, Stephen is a master storyteller, in addition to being an amazing songwriter. He really understands dramatic structure deeply. I mean, I feel like I got so lucky to be writing with Stephen. I mean, it's hard to even put into words. And I know I'm supposed to be the words person, but so Stephen, so let me go back to book writing. So when working with Stephen was so instrumental in our structure. Because that's naturally who he is. In fact, one day I even asked him early on in our collaboration, very early, I couldn't help myself. I said, "You're so good at this. Why do you even need me?" And he said to me the following, well, I can't quote it exactly because it was so long ago, but he basically said to me, I don't like the way I don't feel like I write dialogue. So that was one thing. But what he really was saying is, I love collaborating. And that's when I think about writing Wicked, and a lot of people, and I know people who've written musicals, and I wrote another musical that's very little known when I was younger, much younger, very young. Well, not very young, but much younger than I am now. But musicals are so collaborative because you want the audience to experience it all coming from the same voice. You don't want the audience to go, oh, now here's a song, and now jarringly there's a whole other sort of style or feel when we're in a scene. And so Stephen and I don't know if let me make sure I'm answering about book writing. I think also, there's just so many spinning plates when you're writing a musical, because there's there might be dancing going on. There's just a lot going on, right? And sometimes what I think the book writer's doing, although in our case, like I say, it was so collaborative, it was sometimes hard to separate who was doing. I mean, Stephen was definitely writing the songs, and I'll get into this later, but when I studied at NYU musical theater program, I was Robert Friedman, who you may know of his work, and actually George Wolfe, brilliant man.
Wow.
And I were all in the same class at musical theater program in the first year of this nascent program. And we had these luminaries teaching us, and it was incredible. It taught us so much. It was so inspirational. So Arthur Lawrence, who wrote the books for Gypsy, and he wrote, you're way ahead of me, Lauren.
Yeah, it's my favorite musical. Yeah,
it's an amazing piece of art, of American art, and he wrote the book for West Side Story that Tony Kushner recently, rethought to some extent, but it's the great musical West Side Story is written by Arthur Lawrence and Sondheim and Leonard Bernstein, and he taught us. His attitude toward book writing had to do with, the metaphor I would use would be like kindling, like you're constantly bringing material that could be combustible to the songwriter or songwriters. You're constantly furnishing material. And that's something that it's hard to describe, but I'm going to try to describe it. That is really how we wrote Wicked. In other words, and that applies to the movies as well. But let's just take this the stage play, since you started there. In other words, I would overwrite Lauren, and Javier. I didn't mean to leave you out. I would write an exchange, let's say, between the two young women that was much longer than I knew we were going to eventually have. So that, first of all, I needed to do that for myself to, I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing and find the scene, right? But also I'm hopeful that I'm going to inspire Stephen. And this happened often, where he would see a line of dialogue or he would see a beat and he would go, I want that for the song.
Gotcha.
And that's going to be where the song starts.
Wow.
Or, I can remember specifically with, there's many of them, but let me just take one, which is like, I couldn't be happier, just that whole idea, which ended up being that song, you know, Thank Goodness.
Yeah.
And the refrain of I couldn't be happier, and the play on words. I remember, and this would often be not even something I wrote, but just a long conversation we'd be having about, you know, I'm skipping all over, and I hope that's not too annoying for them.
No, it's great. It's great.
But like, for instance, we did have, you know, really, really deep, endless conversations to start off everything. But we continued to have them, you know, for years, really. Because we found, you know, Stephen came to me with Stephen had the idea to make it into to make that incredible novel into a musical, into a Broadway musical, you know, way before he brought me in. And he'd been thinking about it, and but by the time he contacted me, he was beginning to think he might get permission from Mark Platt and from Gregory Maguire to go ahead with this. So by the time he contacted me, he'd been thinking about it for a while. And so he had these, what I would call tent poles, which is he knew he wanted to start with a version of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, which is what No One Warns the Wicked is. He knew that at the end of the first act, he wanted her to fly on a broom. Yeah. And he knew, he knew at the end, and I hope no one's in the audience who hasn't seen the musical, stage musical. And if you have, just don't listen for a second. Oh, I won't even say it. I'll just say he knew how he wanted it to end in a very generalized way. Okay. And so, so I, coming in, that felt, you know, even before we really started digging in, that felt very right to me, and I just trusted that. So we built out from those tent poles, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Now the way and the way the rewrites went were how do I say this? The basics of the very big arcs of the plot never really changed that much, but everything changed all the time, constantly. Like how we were really telling the story and a million other things. And there was stuff that was in Gregory's book that at first I was trying to use, and no shade to the book, which is a brilliant novel, but it is what it is. It's not
dense. It's dense.
It's extremely dense, but also, yes, and it did not, it was not the plot that Stephen and I, it was not the plot of the novel that Stephen and I fell in love with, to put it mildly. What we fell in love with was the premise, the brilliant premise, genius premise, that the true story of the Wicked Witch of the West has been covered up and hushed up and never told, and that you don't know the true story, and it's been kept from you, and that now she is a person, not just a green witch, and that she has a name and a family and desires and had sex, and I mean it's brilliant. And then the other I'm not going to say the other, but two other major aspects of the novel. His amazing idea that Glinda the Good Witch and the Wicked Witch of the West were actually college roommates forced together by fate in college. That obviously became very important to us. That's in Gregory's novel. He just spins it out in a different manner than we end up doing. And then the third big thing is the political content of his novel. The fact that it is about a corrupt fascist leader who has conned a country. That's been there from the beginning. Many people think that's something we created for these times. That's been the story since, Lauren knows very well, since 2003. Well, since before 2003. But we opened on Broadway in 2003. And And that's never changed. And I was just seeing it in LA recently when it was here to thank everyone. And the stage manager told me she gets the constant question that the stage manager gets is, did they just rewrite it? Did they recently rewrite it? Did they? We did not rewrite it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But you can see why people would think that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's, that part is tragic and heartbreaking for me. I wish it'd become less relevant, not more. But that's where we are.
Right. So moving on to the, to the film, like at what point did it become apparent that it was going to be a film and that you were going to be the one to, to write it? And how did you feel about the prospect of it becoming a movie?
Well, it was apparent very early because our producers on Broadway was partly produced by a film company, Universal.
Right.
So, and it was their first foray into Broadway. They were kind of rolling the dice, and so when it was successful, it wasn't a hard leap to make to figure out they were going to want a movie because they had originally wanted a non-musical movie. That's why they had originally optioned the book, the novel. And that's why they had even started in on a movie, non-musical, I hasten to add, a movie script, by the way, that I never ever read, of course, for understandable reasons. And very different, I'm going to just guess. I'm going to guess maybe a little more like the novel, but in any case, not a musical. And so when Stephen convinced Mark Platt, who was very excited by the idea, he'd always wanted to produce a musical, to let us do this on Broadway. Stephen brought me in, and look who he's bringing in. I mean, he knew that I had written a musical when I was younger because he knows stuff like that. But most people knew me as a screenwriter. Obviously, TV to me is still a screen, maybe littler. It's a screen. I call myself a screenwriter because I don't think there's that much difference anymore. And in fact, it's funny. I sort of don't think there's that much difference anyway, because I think what you're really doing is writing for characters, writing for actors to come in and portray characters, writing a story that will be performed. I mean, that to me is what I do, whether it's on a screen, on a stage, So, so wait a second, Javier, I lost the thread. Oh no.
No. Basically, just when you knew, like, that it was going to be.
I think here, let's get into when you first sat down to adapt Wicked for the screen. What was your objective, and what were some of the first things that you did?
Well, first of all, because of this answer I just gave, because we knew early-ish in the run of Wicked that and talking 20 years ago, that we would be writing a movie at some point, it never was far from my mind. Because that's it was a thing in my mind. It was ahead of me. It was looming. Okay, writers will understand, I think, and maybe even sympathize a little, although I'm not really asking for pity. Yep. But it was a lot of pressure because I just knew it was probably coming, but nobody knew when. Do you know what I mean? But we knew we weren't going to do it right away. And the reason there is an obvious business decision. I mean, it was doing really well. Why do we want to hurry up a movie? But it's more artistic than that. And that's really the truth of it. The artistic thing I have to say is that what we wanted, the more time that it even went on, what became most important to Stephen and I was that we do it in a way that was meaningful to us and that we loved. There was no point in hurrying. It used to amaze me. So many people would say to me, even friends of mine, like, "What's taking so long with the movie? What's taking so long with the movie?" And I would think, why would I be in a hurry to make this movie? Like, if anything, so I would start to try to answer your question, I guess around 10 years ago. I'm not good at math, but I think around 10 years ago, I was really trying to write a version of this movie. And there was no Dana Fox, there was no John M. Chu. There was in the beginning, there wasn't even a Stephen Daldry. It was me, maybe 12 years ago. I was really, honestly, I was constantly making little notes to myself. And this is the thing I want to say, that Stephen and I, when we were together, and that wasn't very often because we live on different coasts, and we're both, and he's incredibly busy and I'm just medium busy. Right. We would always have conversations about the movie. We would always say things like, oh, that should be in the movie, or maybe that shouldn't be in the movie. But usually it was like, that should be in the movie.
Yeah.
And so then and about me, Javier was asking about how did I, listen, I don't kid myself. I know I am a lucky, lucky writer. I was scared the whole time that I would be replaced at some point or another. First, I was scared in theory, and then I was scared like for real. But the thing is, we had real power in the situation, and that's really what made a difference, I think. Also, well, let me just, I don't know how interesting this is to people, but I think it is.
Yeah.
I think that we had a very unique situation, completely unique, because Donna Langley, who's really quite incredible, I think, the head of Universal, Universal, she wasn't there in the beginning. It was Stacey Snider when we were first making the show, the stage show. But Universal, we made them not just a lot of money, but we were trusted collaborators, you might say. I mean, we did something with them that they had never done, and it did really well. It was very successful. So they trusted us, I think, in a way that is different. And then just on a legal level, and this is not my expertise, so please don't ask me questions about this, but just legally, we held the rights. We wrote it. When you write a musical, that wasn't Universal paying us to write a musical. That isn't how that happens. We wrote a stage musical. We own that musical. I mean, so people have little points in it and stuff, but it's ours. We're the authors. So we had authorial, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but we had, they couldn't do certain things with it. They couldn't just high-handedly replace me. I was always scared that they would. Yeah. But I think for obvious reasons. One is just being a writer. You live in Hollywood, you've seen it happen to a million people, a million really famous people. It just so when I'm writing it, and then we were allowed to choose our director. I mean, and we at first chose Stephen Daldry. It just came right from our hearts. We just really admire this man and still do. But and we worked with him for years, and there's stuff that Stephen Daldry came up with that is in the movie, for sure. But in the end, we had to part company, and it was very amicable. But it just wasn't. I guess you could say it wasn't catching fire, and I think it had to do with a lot of things. But when John M. Chu came in, John was so motivated. He's a very different person. He had a very personal feeling about the show. That, no shade to Stephen Daldry, who I honestly really look up to, but I don't think Stephen Daldry had the same emotion attached to it. John was dying to do it and had a whole history with the show. He had seen it at a very young age, when he was like 20, USC film student. He had seen it in our out-of-town tryout in San Francisco, which very few people have seen. And our clunky, primitive version of it before we fixed it, before we went to Broadway. And he loved it then. And, he just came in like a rocket taking off. And he was really motivating. And that's when he brought in Dana. His whole thing, I think, was he was determined to have it happen, you see. So that's when we really got our schedule and got our, you know what I mean?
Right, absolutely.
But so I'm seeing some of the comments, and people are so kind.
So we'll go ahead and jump into the script. What do you think, Lauren?
Yeah, as Dustin pulls that up though, I'm just curious, like if you could venture a guess, the script that's out for FYC, like what draft is that? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to
1 million.
I don't know how to explain it because as I tried to explain, and this is one of the reasons that it's such a crazy looking credit, but it felt right to me and it felt right to Dana ultimately and right to everyone involved. I'll just say. One of the reasons it's that is that I had been working, as I tried to explain, on and off for years on a screenplay of one movie of both acts, and we really worked off of, a lot of the work I had done, if you see what I mean. Like that screenplay was what we were working off of. And I just,
got it.
That was a lot of work, if you see what I mean. Previous to John, previous to Dana. But then but you see, it's very subtle and it's very nuanced and it's very hard to describe because when Dana and John came in, Stephen was always with us. Like Stephen is such a big part of this movie. I can't overstate that. Stephen's a huge part of the screenplay because nothing was just sort of like, oh, Stephen, go away. We'll like make a screenplay. It wasn't like that. He was weighing in. He wasn't at every story meeting, but he was at so many. And his comments and thoughts and ideas are really reflected in the movie. Wow. Because that's who he is. And also because we were creating, we were figuring out how we were going to do these numbers cinematically, and that involved him every minute. He's a great, incredible collaborator, as I said before. So is John Chu, and so is Dana. So it was very collaborative. What I was going to say was that, what was I going to say? Oops. Now I'm confused again. What was your last question?
Well, it was just about drafts.
Because what I wanted to say is that that's one of the reasons it's really like, I find it impossible to count.
Yeah.
For me, drafts. But when John came in, we'd been talking for quite a while before John even. Should it be 2 movies? And there were reasons why it should be, and we weren't sure. And John came in with a real certainty, like, I believe it should be 2 movies, and I have a vision of it. And so Stephen and I both felt so assured when he was so sure. And also it really had to do with a very practical matter, which is that in the second half of the story, this act 2 or whatever you want to call it, let's just call it movie 2. In the second part, Stephen had wanted to do 2 new songs, and they ended up being just right for the second part of the movie. So let's say we're trying to make it 1 movie. Our whole reason for doing this movie is that we want to go deeper. We want to bring more nuance. Also, we're dealing now with John, and John he's so cinematic, and he really wants to linger on images, and he wants to bring out these moments, and we all did. We want it to be a movie. We don't want it to be like, oh, we're going to cleave as close as we can to the show. In fact, it was really the opposite. It was really me. I just say me because I'm the one talking right now, but all of us, but let's just say me. It was really me opening my mind all the time, going, how different could we go, with this moment? Like, maybe this isn't the perfect way to play this. Maybe there's a whole other way to play this. And so that took a lot of experimentation. That's why I can't really answer your question, Lauren, because, for instance, Dana and I have laughed about this. I would send like 3 different versions of one sequence to Dana and John, and then John would sort of talk to me and go, well, I really don't like this one, but this one is kind of interesting. Dana would do a pass on it. She'd throw it back to me. I'd finish it off, but I had already done like I'm not trying to complain, but it just lost count. I just lost count.
Yeah,
We were
that's
doing
super
that all the time.
insightful. That's super insightful as we kind of get into this, like to know as we're like looking at the pages. Which Javier, do you wanna
But
kick
there
us
are
off?
things in the movie, I'll just hasten to add, that were there
Yeah.
from the beginning. Like when I
Right.
very first started writing it alone, if you see what I mean. In
Right.
fact, my former agent, she became a manager, but she went to see the movie and she said, Winnie, this is exactly how it was like 10 years ago. Well, it wasn't, believe me. But in her mind,
Yeah.
when she read it 10 years ago or whatever that was, 8 years ago, who knows, it seemed to her that almost the same movie. Isn't
Right.
that interesting?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff, you know, that I had from the beginning, or that Stephen and I should more rightly say that Stephen and I had wanted to have from the beginning, if you see what I mean.
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely, certain spots. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to going to start, of course, where we always have to start on page 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're into the script.
So this is very John, okay? Because we always had the idea from the very get-go, like when we very first started talking about the movie, okay? Stephen and I don't know who came up with it, but we had this idea. It starts at the scene of the crime. That's how I used to think of it in my mind. It starts at the scene of the crime. We're gonna pan up through the witch's castle, and we're gonna this castle that we remember from the 1939 movie. We're gonna see like an overturned bucket of water, and we're gonna see like the hat, okay? And then all these monkeys are gonna, okay? So we had that in the draft, you know, when John first read when he first came in, when it was all one movie. But he, you know, look, he's so incredible. He came up with this idea about water. Well, water is the weapon.
Right.
Water is the murder weapon. So fucking awesome. I mean, that's where you just are in awe. Like, and also I loved your comment, Lauren, about, you know, we're starting to see things upside down. We're realizing that we're upside down. I know that that was purposeful on his part. I mean, he's so amazing.
Yeah, and did that mean like that because we're seeing a twist on the story? Was that what was the take? What was the purpose of the upside down?
Well, first of all, this starts with the novel of Gregory Maguire's novel, and it continues through our stage play, and it continues through our movie. And it's this whole idea that, you know, you think you know. You think you're so sure that you're so sure. You're so sure of what you know. Well, actually, you're looking, but you're not seeing.
Right.
You know, and what is, you know, and that has to do with people. You know, you're looking at this person and you think you're seeing them, and you're not seeing them at all.
Right.
And then it has to do with this whole idea of, what am I seeing? What is that? You know?
Yeah.
And when he first described it to me, I'm not kidding, I got chills. He just described this. He described a drop of water and how it's going to fill, how you're not going to know what it is at first.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's a drop of water. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. It's so cool. And so he was building off of this idea that we had brought him, if you see what I mean, of starting at the scene of the crime. Oh, what I'm not mentioning is that I really want to just say, because it was so cool, is John, the whole way we started the movies, once John came aboard and brought Dana in, is even before Dana came in, we sat with John, me and Stephen, and he wanted to go through every beat of the musical and listen to what had been motivating us, and what were we thinking about, and why is this song like this, and why did you title it this? And he wanted to hear everything. It was so cool. And
that's
then
like us right now.
What?
So that's like us right now.
Yeah, only I can relax now because I don't have to be terrified that I'm gonna fail and not write a very good screenplay. And I mean, it's scary. I mean, I was scared. I mean, I'm not saying that I wasn't also having a great time. There were times it was so exciting and wonderful, and he's so wonderful, and the collaboration was exciting. But man, I was a little nervous, I've got to admit.
I'm sure, yeah.
Because what happened is then when John Chu came in, we had this hard and fast schedule, and then it became almost like TV, which is one of the reasons that Dana was so invaluable. Then it became almost like TV, where they had put down money on the sound stages in London. We had it was like hard and fast. It wasn't like a lot of movies where, well, we might start now, and I guess if we don't start now, we'll start later. And a lot of movies are like that. They're almost looking for a reason not to shoot. But we were like, we were dug in. It's like, you know what I mean? We were locked in at that point to a very specific schedule to make. We had to write 2 movies. Do you understand what I mean? So if I say I was scared, first of all, you guys, I mean, I'm talking to my fellow writers. I'm scared writing anything, and I think that that's completely normal and a part of being an artist. And I have come to understand that. So it's not like fear is like a big surprise, but it was a little scary. On the other hand, of course, the pressure was my friend, as I think you can well imagine, was all of our friends. We just had to make some decisions, It couldn't be any more like, well, it could be this version, it could be that version. We had to make a decision.
Right.
So let's scoot down to page 2. You touched on this a little bit, but they definitely we open with ding dong, the witch is dead, essentially.
Right.
But I also think, just in terms of a movie, it's a great way to establish that this is a world where people sing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is like really important in a movie musical.
Absolutely. I mean, but it's not just ding dong, the witch is dead. That is part of it, but it's also, we're going to meet Glinda, and Glinda is going to be Glinda, but she's also going to start to we're going to start, it's real exposition.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love the description of Glinda as the good witch, the best witch of all.
I think the best witch of all came from Dana.
That's great.
I'm pretty sure.
That is really good. All right, so we'll jump a little bit to page 7, to this flashback that shows Elphaba's conception, birth, and childhood.
Right. This is so much John Chu also, because of course this is in our musical, the singing and the scene itself. For a long time, this was very, it took a long time to realize that how can I explain it? I'm not sure I can explain it, but he wanted to play with gravity right early, you know. And that's obviously a big shift from the stage musical, where we don't do any such thing. You know, that's one of the biggest changes. That there's so many changes, but that's a big change.
Yeah, we were going to ask you about expanding that flashback, but also about the pair of small green hands. It's so important because it comes back, right? And so we wanted to ask you about what. Do you want to talk about fleshing out that flashback for the film?
Well, I think the small green hands, is something that then John decided to bring back. I think we had this first. The pop-up book, I want to say, came from my daughter, who's a wonderful writer, who I've actually collaborated with on other things, and I was talking to her. I think I was probably lying on my bed close to tears, just like looking for some way to tie her to the wizard, tie the child Elphaba to the wizard. And when you were talking about drafts, I had so many, before John, pre-John, I had so many drafts of her childhood because Stephen and I really wanted to see her as a little child. We wanted that desperately. I had so many other versions of this. And none of them quite were right. And we all felt that, I think, and they were also too long. I was looking for a quicker, a swifter, more elegant way to tie her to the wizard. And my daughter said, what if she was reading a pop-up book?
Yeah.
About the wizard. And I just loved it immediately, because then the little pop-up could be like a little wizard in the scene, you know? And then of course, what we play with later when she, you know, when she meets the wizard is that, I mean, what I believe is that even if the audience has kind of consciously forgotten about that pop-up book moment, I think that it's still playing in their minds and their hearts. In other words, not only does Cynthia play that meeting him scene just amazingly, but she does everything amazingly. But I think we're realizing, the audience is feeling that this desire to meet the wizard goes back a long way.
Yeah.
And that her feelings about the wizard goes back a long way. So I was really thrilled when my daughter said that to me. And then of course it became obvious that, because we also wanted to see little Nessa, we wanted to see their relationship early. Again, I had so many versions, gotta be 10, 12, maybe more other versions of this whole idea of seeing the two little girls young as tiny ones. But this was the one that worked. I had them in a school play yard, and the taunting children were singing a little mean song. I don't know if you can hear the mean song.
See that? Can we see that, Dustin? Can you scroll down a little to where they're like throwing pebbles at her and stuff? Because I think that's what we wanted to ask, just ask about next, like just the.
Yeah, but I think I had so many versions where they were just different they were singing this taunting song, but I had it in a school playground. I just had different versions of it. And then it was easy. I think it was probably John suggested that it just be right there at the governor's mansion, and that it just be kids in the neighborhood. And that just made it, I don't know, kind of simpler, I think, and swifter than going to a new location and they're at school. And I don't know, it's just a whole other thing. I was, you know, sometimes I have to write a lot of stuff that I throw away.
Yeah.
Definitely economical.
But we all have to. But I mean, to get to this economic thing, it took me a really long time to find it.
So we'll go ahead. I want to stop really quickly on page 10. So which we really love, like let's see, Glinda, let's see, where's
it's up at the top. Glinda's smile tightens. We noted that.
Right.
Where she has that slight smile, like you know what I mean, like her smile tightens right before she burns.
You know, the lighting the effigy was new in this collaboration. We used to have, Stephen and I had an effigy before, but I don't think, maybe I'm really wrong, but I don't think she lit it. I think she saw it from afar.
Yeah, but we just love
I
that.
think, and the lighting it is just so great.
And my question here is like, so now we have, like, you know, she gets the question, Glinda, is it true you were her friend? Right?
And that's in the stage play. That's
and so,
in fact, all this dialogue people will recognize from the stage play.
And our question,
but everyone except for Javier.
Yeah, so
well, I'm only saying it because I want people to understand that it's this strange amalgamation, if that is a word, of new and old.
Yeah.
And there's so much that is just completely from the play.
Yeah.
Right, Lauren?
But our question was,
but there's so much that's new. Like in every scene, there's new.
Right, but it's because of the screenplay though, page 10, right? So that feels like an inciting incident. Was that any? And did you put any thought in that, like the structuring the screenplay? Like, I want this line to be on page 10, or was that something?
No, I never think that way. I've never thought that way in my life.
Right.
It's just not.
Oh, you
It's
did.
just not me. No, I did not. I never thought that.
Wow.
Not one time.
It's
But,
I mean,
you
it's a
know,
pretty happy coincidence though.
Exactly.
well, yeah, I mean, whatever it is, but I'm just being honest. That's just not something I've ever thought of or
Yeah.
care about.
Let's go down to page 12. I love the line, Glinda's line, they're gonna miss me so much.
And I've had that for a decade. I had that. I was holding on to it so hard. Yes, I love that too. And it was always going to be, you know, her saying goodbye to her parents.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it just says so much about her. And the other thing that I wanted to note, which I thought was kind of interesting, the two excited students, Fanny and Shen, rush up to Glinda. I just noticed that wasn't, it's not gendered. Was that?
Well, I think that's because at that point, it might have been true that John had said to us, because it was his idea. He said, you know, I would love to have Bo and Yang do this. Yeah. And I was enchanted. I mean, I'm such a fan.
Me too. Yeah.
Such a fan. And I thought it was such a great idea. So smart. So I was thrilled. And that's probably why you know, I'm not sure we were clear for a while who was going to play what, you know what I mean? Which one? So it took, you know, that was just the easier way to do it, probably, you know.
Right. Well, and I love the line too about Miss Cringeable's Twirling Academy.
I don't think that's in there. I mean, it got cut.
Yeah.
You know, it got cut from the movie, but it's in the deleted scenes, I think, right?
Yeah.
I really love that line as well.
And it serves as exposition for how they, you know, that she knows how to twirl.
She knows how to swirl. It sets up a skill. So on page 14, this is kind of a pivotal moment here where Glinda yelps and sees the figure in all her green glory, and so do we. And also just the little her razor sharp mind and tongue serve as armor to protect her tender soul from moments like these. And that's great description. But what I really want to talk about is this kind of it's extended for the moment, but for the movie, but this moment where they meet, and this dialogue between them, and I just go ahead. Yeah.
Well, this was definitely something Dana and I wrote together. I don't mean together, but sort of back and forth, and came up with stuff together. And then, of course, some of it is from the play, you know, but it is extended, and it makes such a difference in the movie. I mean, I love it, love it, love it, because it's like, it really sets up, you know, it's just more. It's if you could go up a little bit, keep going. No, keep going the forward.
Other direction.
Yeah, like yeah, it's, you know, it's for a long time in my drafts, I did not have this kind of exchange between them.
Right.
And it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great lines.
And yeah, it just sets them up so beautifully when they're put together. You know, on stage it works too, but it's a different animal, of course, you know. On stage, let me just say something about the scene. I don't know if people know the play, know the musical, but Lauren will appreciate this.
I will appreciate it.
The whole expositional scene when you first get to Shiz is stuffed with, I mean, it's a huge scene. So much happens. It happens like rapid fire. And I never felt ever for 1 minute like I was going to take that scene and stick it on a screen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm getting away with it on stage, barely. And I never liked how, I shouldn't say I don't like it, because I've come to like it. I've come to love it. But it goes by so fast. Everything happens so fast. And I was never, and it's a bunch of very important exposition. And I knew, let me put it this way, I knew I wasn't going to get away with it on screen.
Right.
So this section was one of the hardest sections to write because there's a lot that has to be exposited, and I was trying to figure out how we were going to do it. We all were. So I just want to just flag that this, I don't mean this scene between the two girls, the whole section of arriving at Shiz, finding out about the sister, finding out about meeting Galinda and Elphaba meet. You meet Madame Morrible, you meet Bach, you find out that Elphaba gets upset because she's afraid that that her father's going to be angry because she's not taking care of her sister properly. We obviously changed the way that plays out, but it's still the same idea.
Yeah.
We changed a lot of things about how it plays out. The fact that she's not even going to be a student, that she's just there. I just think that came out of a very long conversation where we all just knew it could be better, if you see what I'm saying. And that was a lot of my outlook with the movie. First I wanted to be obviously cinematic. That sort of goes without saying, I think. And I wanted it to be its own thing. And I wanted to be able to find things that were maybe even a better version than we had, or that you couldn't do, like the pop-up book, or like seeing the children, that you couldn't do on stage. Because our show is it's the length of time a long musical is. There's not room for more, if you see what I mean. And there certainly isn't room for painting a little girl green and having her be, I mean, forget it.
Dustin, go. I think what we want to do next is jump ahead to like page what is it, 20? I think it's
20.
So
in these 5 pages.
Am I talking too much because are we far behind?
I think we're okay. We'll find ways to kind of keep it moving. But I think what I really want to know, I know Javier's got a big question here, but what I really want to know, going off of what you were just talking about, Galinda and Elphaba have these really specific voices as characters, and I wonder if you have any insights about developing their voice, like their senses of humor and their voices. Like, I think Javier was going to note the line, I'm not sure I'm beautifully tragic.
I mean, again, that line is in the play. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in the play that I knew I was going to keep. It's not like I'm saying, oh, the play had to be, rethought completely. No, I mean, this is why it's hard to describe, because yes, we did rethink really every beat. But yet we did. I'm not kidding. We went through. There's no beat in that musical that wasn't rethought and re-examined. But there were obviously lines that I just believed in. That I just believed, even when she first when Glinda first floats down and says, "It's good to see me, isn't it?" Doesn't she say that?
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, I think somebody said to me, not Stephen, and not John Chu, but maybe like Mark, said he felt it would be too much like presentational, like a stage moment. And I just believed in it for her character, and I just really, really fought for it. And people, it was okay. I wasn't sure if it would get cut or not, because I wasn't sure how it would play, I mean, as you can see by reading it, a lot of stuff did get cut. And I don't think because it didn't play well, but I think because for time.
Right. Yeah. So scroll down a little bit, Dustin, to page 22, because that's an example of like how what is it? is so Morrible, Madame Morrible covers for.
Well, like this is a perfect example of something that I conceived of it so many different ways, and I pitched so many ideas of what could happen here, and John really just pitched me back like he was seeing like everything sliding. It took me a while to realize what he wanted. And what he wanted was he wanted to play with gravity the whole time. And you know, that was a new idea for me. Because for me, you know, I'm pretty good at opening my mind, but I was also, you know, influenced by the way things were. And until she gets to define gravity, you know, on the stage,
Right.
until she gets to define gravity, she doesn't defy gravity until she gets to that moment. But John was not seeing it that way, and I got to realize like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. Like it just took me a second, you know. But he was seeing that from the minute she was born, we have this line, and from the moment she was born, she was different.
Yeah,
which is, you know, an understatement.
Yeah.
And he was playing with gravity with her the whole time.
Right.
If you see what I mean. And that was his concept, and I had to kind of get on board with that, and I did, believe me. But it's not like I thought of it, and I think the reason I did not think of it is, you know, maybe because I'm not, you know, a director, and I don't, you know, he thinks in a different way. But I think I was too, you know, it was hard to sometimes divorce yourself from the play,
right?
If you see what I mean.
Right. And then let's move on to page 25. So this is interesting that we want to kind of know how you eased into this about Morrible asking Elphaba about her talent, except with seamlessly into the I Want song, which is what Lauren is the one who taught me what an I Want song is.
Thank you, Lauren.
So can you talk about easing us into the song The Wizard and I, where Elphaba sings about what she wants?
Well, you were asking before of what a book writer does. And that's a big part, obviously, of what a book writer does. I don't do it alone because I'm working with Stephen Schwartz, and we're like, as I was describing before, we're having these very constant and deep conversations about what we're picturing and what we think could happen. But eventually, you do want to write something that's going to lead into the song, lead into the moment of singing. Even if I don't, it's such a give and take. It's so closely collaborative. I can't even explain it, but I will say that if you'll notice in the movie, obviously, Morrible spends more time with her. We all wanted that. You know, I wanted that, and everyone wanted that. We wanted to have them more bonded, to feel that Elphaba was more getting something from the relationship, and you wanted to build that trust, so that when there is a betrayal, and it works on stage, but it's not the same. It's not the same as seeing them together as much as we do here, and feeling this feeling of that, oh my goodness, like, and of course this thing we came up with, thank God, I love it so much, of that Elphaba isn't even a student. And Morrible, like the second we came up with that, everyone was like, that's it, because it's like Morrible's the one that says, no, you should be studying here. You shouldn't have to go home with your father. You should be studying here. You belong here. It's stronger. And it just made everything fall into place better.
So go see, where page are we at? Let's go to page 28. So in the middle, this is just basically, we love this part that where like Elphaba finishes singing the song.
Well, this is John.
Yeah, she's
the idea of this horizon and the blowing leaves and the cliff. This is all
it's very
John.
Julie Andrews, you know,
Yeah.
it's very
Well, you know, John not only loves musicals, but you know, he knows a lot about them. He's really, you know, the man. I mean, you know, and it's funny because, you know, he brought so much water and bodies of water. This is what I was talking about before when he started with the drop of water, right? And he brought that all the way through. Now, I would never have dreamed. I would never have sat down and said, oh, they arrived by boat to Shiz. It just wouldn't have occurred to me.
Right.
But he was playing with this idea of and what I love about it is that I feel that it really gives more magic to the land. And it gives more, you know, water is the place of the unconscious, the unconscious, unconscious. It's the unconscious. Yes, it's in a Jungian sense, it's the unconscious. It's a dreamlike, you know, place. So the fact that he has them go to the Ozdust, and the Ozdust is sort of in this underground strange kind of cavern, or you know, it's kind of, I think, surrounded by water or sort of watery. I mean, he just plays with it so much, and that's all John Chu. Can't take credit for that.
Well, we have sort of a similar question. If we move to page, I think it's 31.
Somebody said in the chat that water is really important in a lot of Asian mythologies, and then there's Yang. Yeah, and I think I mentioned Yang.
Yeah. A similar question, page 31, where they're writing letters home. I love the line, I can't hear your guesses because this is a letter.
I love it too.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of it.
Just and leading into what is this feeling? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, John and I had numerous conversations about this because, you know, this was so important. How is he going to stage this, literally? And from the beginning, I remember him saying to me, I want to go back, and I want it to be percussive. I believe that's what he said to me. He said, I want it to be percussive, like there's this and there's that, and maybe she slams something down, like she slams off a light. And then I always wanted it to be that I pitched to him, I said, they're lying there in bed and they're both wide awake, and it's like, what the fuck, you know, how am I ever going to fall asleep with this feeling? And but what he went further with that by doing I think this is where he does the split screen, isn't it? Am I?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So, like, you know, congratulations to John Chu for winning this. That was quite a surprising and very welcome moment. We were so excited. We were screaming our lungs out. When John won. That was really nice because he's been ridiculously overlooked. So anyway, what was I saying? So he wanted it. He kept saying, Winnie, I want it to be percussive. I want it to be like, like rhythmic, right? So that's what I was going for, you know, in my, but it makes it sound so easy. And I had so many different versions of the beginning of this. Like but basically the version we got was when he said to me percussive, and then I understood better. I mean, I think sometimes the director just needs to try to help you understand what he's picturing or she's picturing, and then I could picture it, and then I could write to it. So I mean, obviously a lot of it is what already existed, but we always had this idea of them sort of, I mentioned Arthur Lawrence before, like a West Side Story moment when they were going to end up like almost like confronting each other like the Sharks and the Jets in the dining hall. That isn't exactly how it is, but it sort of is that, I think.
Sure.
It's like, do you know what I mean? And it's reminiscent of the show as well, because of course, you know, she's at one point, Galinda has got everybody around her, and Elphaba has basically nobody around her. So, but the thing we came up with that I love in the movie is when Galinda looks up and she sees Elphaba with Morrible.
Yeah.
And that's really great. For me, I was a discovery for me, and I loved it because it was like it fuels her fury and her jealousy and her everything. It like pours gasoline on the fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you I think on page 35 when the song ends, do you remember anything about just the punctuation of this number with where she scares her by going boo?
Well, but that is how it is in the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not that different.
Yeah.
The scene you skipped is an important scene, I think, where Elphaba first comes in after being with Morrible. When she very first comes in, before Loathing starts. You know, that's also dialogue I wrote for the movie that I wrote a million versions of, but that's basically I always wanted that for the movie. I always wanted, you know, this like, when she first comes in, you see what I mean? When they first, have to be in the room together. Because that's kind of skipped in other words, when they're writing letters home on stage, the understanding is that, you know, we didn't see the first moment that she entered that room. I always wanted that, so we got that.
That's interesting.
Like even in the stage play, I wrote numerous versions of that, if you see what I mean. But we never had room for it, and we had to cut it. And we didn't need it on stage, but it was needed here.
Okay, we'll jump ahead just a little bit more to this the scene in Dillamond's classroom. Okay, so in preparation for this discussion, like I just went back and read the pilot for My So-Called Life, and I was delighted to find.
I wasn't thinking of Brian.
But just so everyone just so everyone notes, like there's literally a scene in My So-Called Life that's like almost exactly
in the pilot where he keeps raising his hand.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's just something I think of as funny, maybe.
Yeah.
But you know, here it wasn't meant to be funny. I mean, and in the show she does it as well. This is lifted from the show.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how we do it in the show, except it's different, just like every single scene. because he ends up showing them a slideshow about the history of Oz and the place, the way animals used to be thought of and used to be treated. And but the dialogue is extremely similar, I believe, if not exactly. I think it's maybe exact, but we added that slideshow, and that was something that I had come up with even before John. But he put his own spin on it. You know, he just had his own John Chewy way of doing it. That was so cool, having to do with sort of light and very cinematic.
Yeah. Well, and I think something that is a little bit different from the stage version, if you go down to page 41, Dustin, where Elphaba sneaks out and you know,
well, that's completely different. Yes.
Yeah, it goes and listens.
I was never going to play the animal story exactly as it is on stage ever, because you know, this is from the very beginning, because obviously part of the opportunity of doing a movie is that I could show more animals, first of all. And I came up with this idea of a secret meeting, which would give you the feeling of an impending doom. Of what they're up against in terms of the world they're living in. And I always wanted this, and this was a scene I had versions of early on, before John Chu. And what we we just played, we had so many different ways we got into it. This is typical, rewrite thing, I think, of just not sure how you're going to get into it and stuff like that. But I had versions of this many, many years ago. And just I was always I was very focused on the idea of how we could make the animal story even more emotional, even more vivid,
Mhm.
and this is one way. There's other ways too that we end up doing, but this is one way.
I love the deer friend,
yeah.
a cow.
Cow, actually.
That's a great line. Let's jump a little bit to page 45, I believe. Elphaba talking to Dr. Dillamond, almost being run over by a prince, and this character description for us was worth pausing on. The horse stops short, turns to his rider, a strikingly beautiful young man in casual yet princely attire, Piero Tigalar. Do you have any kind of philosophy of writing character description at all?
Well, this is a pretty short character description, I gotta say, don't you think? In general, it's funny. I think it was hard for me to remember that I even had to write a character description for anybody, because when you've had a play running on Broadway and on tour and all over the world, not to brag, but for more than 20 years, you sort of take it for granted, like who people are. Do you know what I mean? And I had to almost remind myself I did have to remind myself to do it. But that said, I guess I try to be, I try to be short all the time if I can be. But that doesn't mean I start to write short. I cut down. I might write very lengthily, and then I cut.
Yeah.
Delicately. It was important. It's important that he's strikingly beautiful, because that's a plot point, actually, for me.
Absolutely.
So, I just said what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Let's see, I think page 49. We just so basically we're only stopping here because we're in a library and we just love shows them around, the book place.
Javier's in the book place right now.
Yeah. So
yes, you're in the book place.
To us, that's a great part of the script, just because we're very fond of libraries.
Yeah, because your life is library. Got it.
Yeah, it's a medium rare books, and so
I mean, it's funny because John didn't really reveal to me when I was writing this, just that kind of circular crazy thing that's happening in the library. So that wasn't something I was actually completely aware of. But I just was picturing an important decorous place that he comes in and kind of just the way he does. I mean, we don't have a library on stage. It was really fun to have one. I used to have a version, Lauren, where they had the Grimmery under glass at the library.
That's
and
cool.
We realized that we did not need to introduce the Grimmery that early, because I was determined in the movie to introduce the Grimmery before that moment when Morrible when she actually reads from it. And that was something I was determined to do, and it was a question of really trying to figure out, like, how are we going to do that? And that's one of the things we really feel great about, that we not only, as we all know, it's really wonderful when a solution or a scene can have more than one purpose, can operate on for 3 different purposes, or have 3 different things. I'm just using the number 3, but I mean, can have multiple reasons for existence. And so I'm jumping ahead, I know, but that part where we do the cameos.
Yeah,
And
we're
Stephen's
definitely
written
planning
this,
to ask about that.
well, Stephen's written this whole new number, and that all came out of my strong feeling that we wanted to introduce the idea of the grimoire earlier than when she just reads it, and also how to introduce how to really have an understanding of the wizard and the history and what actually happened. And I know we're not there yet, but I first wrote it as a little play, that was being put on. And then Stephen said, you know what? Oh my goodness, we could musicalize this. And then John said, oh, and that's the perfect roles for Kristen and Adina. Because I had written it as like the Wise Women of Oz, being presented as like a little play.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know I jumped ahead, so please forgive me.
But it's good. No, it's I mean, no worries. So let's go down to 55, I think was one of the next things that we pulled. So everyone's getting ready for the Ozdust ballroom. And Glinda's getting ready with Fanny and Shen Shen, and she pulls out this hat, and you know, oh dear, my granny makes the most hideous hats.
Which is from the show, which is from our, all of this is from the play.
I just wanted to ask, which is, it's kind of a question in like the development of the show, but there's like Oz speak.
Right. Well, hideous actually was made up by one of our original cast members who played Shen Shen, I believe.
Oh, cool.
But what's cute, what's funny is that she used to just say this off stage. Like, I had been writing all these Ozian words, and she just started to call something hideous, and I heard her do it. I think this is how it happened, and I just used it for the hat. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah,
like the kids started, the kids in the show started saying stuff like that, like sort of, you know, to each other.
Yeah, and I was just kind of wondering about the
well, I had a specific reason. When you're reading Gregory's book, one of the things he did brilliantly is you really believe that Oz is a real place. And he made up some words. I didn't always I don't think, I can't know anymore if I used words that Gregory made up, but I don't think I did. But like let me give you an example. He called sandwiches huffies, and that someone was eating a sandwich, and it was called a huffy. He just would do that, and it's part of his playing with language. I immediately knew when we started writing it, I wanted to get, but I'm leaving out such an important detail, which is that in the 1939 movie, which is such an important, you know, touchstone for all of this, and which means so much to all of us, to all of us collaborators, the 1939 movie is huge in our minds. You know, Yip Harburg wrote the lyrics for all the songs, and he also wrote some of the dialogue in that movie. And he was always playing with language. And if you listen to the songs, there's a lot of play. It's like the lion. There's a lot of playfulness of language, or even If I Only Had a Brain. So it felt right to me for Oz to feel, you know, I didn't want people to be watching the show and be thinking, yeah, it sort of looks like New Jersey. You know, I wanted people to feel like they were in this mythical land of Oz. And how could I do that? Obviously the designers were going to do their part. You know, Stephen's beautiful music was going to do his part, but my words could sometimes transport people to another place, and that's why I started doing that.
Gotcha.
You know, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's just kind of colorful, and sometimes people had to pull me back from the edge because I was doing it too much, and I would do it so much, and Stephen would say to me, "That's just one too many." But then Stephen started doing it in his own lyrics.
Yeah.
And that's how that started.
Gotcha. That's so fascinating. Javier, did you want to move down to?
Yeah, let's do let's see, page 57 and 58.
Can I just mention that I love everyone, what people are saying in the chats? It's so sweet.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
so
it's hard to keep an eye on that, but yeah, they're pretty awesome.
yeah.
So a couple spots on page 57. Elphaba takes the hat thrown by the second unexpected show of generosity, and so in italics you have I misjudged this girl?
Because that's like her thought balloon, you know, it's
Right,
like
right. And so like a little further down the page, I think Fierro greets Bach like they're old friends, make sure Nessa gets safely onto the boat. And then
I wanted to show that Fierro was, you know, this thoughtful guy, you know, there was more to him than just,
well, yeah, and
yeah.
my question here is like, because there's so many tidbits here about like there's so much going on, but there's also things that can be emotionally and visually engaging, but playable by actors. You know, is that do you think about that when you're writing description?
Constantly. Because, you know, the whole thing about what we do is we're writing for actors. And I have to start thinking about that early. I want a moment to be playable. I want to ask myself, how is that playable? How do I, you know, I put myself in the position of being in the scene all the time and sort of acting it out a little. And I want to, I want, see, actors, you know, they're, they really, when you have, if you want to have wonderful actors, you have to give them a lot to play. Otherwise, they're not that interested and they're not going to come to you. You know, it's easy to get like a mediocre actor to do something. I mean, not to be bitchy, but if you want someone who's really good, you have to be thinking about those actors way before you even know who's cast. Way before. Yeah. It's not about who's cast. It's about how to attract in. Yes, such braverism. I know, you know, Bowen ad-libbed that. And I just and he was so sweet because he said to me, well, I have the word braverism, you know, in the show, and he knows the show really well. Morrible uses it at one point in Act 2. And he said, Winnie, I hope it's okay. It just fits so perfectly. And I said, oh, okay. It's like, you know, it's perfect. Yeah. But that he did ad-lib that. It made me so happy that he ad-libbed that. I love that you put in the chat about the screenwriters of Oz, that the 1939, the people who wrote the 1939 movie. Thank you. Because those were brilliant screenwriters. And, you know, they didn't all sit together and write it. They sort of like one wrote it and then another wrote it and then another wrote it. And then Yip Harper, who was writing the lyrics, you know, added in some really interesting, really funny, he was very clever dialogue.
Oh, you know that. And then page 58, we just want to touch on this, that the joke.
Speaking of Yip Harper.
Lemons and melons and pears, oh my.
Right.
No, it didn't make it into the movie, but
it did not. It did not.
Right.
And you know, there's a lot of good reason. I don't miss that cut at all. Like I have to tell you, because I get it. You know, that's sort of it works on stage pretty well. But you know, like when we do the show in other countries, it means nothing to them. So we always encourage them to cut it.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm sure everyone wants to talk about the pivotal scene on page 62, where you know, Glinda gets into the sorcery seminar via Elphaba, and when Morrible reveals that Elphaba you know, is actually showing up at at the ballroom, it sobers Glinda up really quick.
And of course, this is very, very similar, as you know, Lauren, to what we play on stage.
Yeah.
It really, the words are pretty much the same, you know. It's just that the way that the two exceptional artists who play those roles played it is different. And different, I think, in the most wonderful way. You know, it was it's not that different because we basically, this is the moment on stage as well where they bond,
Mhm.
where they discover each other. It's just was, it's also different in a movie because you
Yeah.
can go to those close-ups and you can see their eyes and you can feel them feeling what they're feeling. And of course, when she starts to cry, so incredibly moving.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a perfect example, I think, of writing something and then two actresses come in and they bring their whole souls into it and it just elevates.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess let's Dustin, let's jump forward a little bit to the scene that occurs like immediately after the ballroom scene where they're um
Where
uh
they're
they're
bonding.
talking. Yeah, I mean this
Right.
has always been just as a fan of the show. It's like one of my favorite scenes, and they have they connect and they start to trust each other, and they're not like
Right.
singing. It's a book.
And this is exact from the play. From
Yeah.
the play.
Yeah.
In
Can
other
you
words,
talk
this
about just writing this scene, just
I can
yeah,
tell you
yeah,
exactly
yeah.
because I know exactly where this scene came from,
Mhm.
which is not always true for me.
Yeah.
But Arthur Lawrence was my teacher, and Arthur Lawrence, Gypsy, West Side Story, The Way We Were, brilliant writer. And as I mentioned earlier in the evening, when I was at NYU, he was teaching us um, really incredible experience. And I still kept in touch with him when decades later, when I was writing Wicked, we had a friendship of sorts. And Stephen and I asked him as a favor if we would read a version of the play, an early draft. And he read it, and one of his comments to me was, he said, "When do they bond as
Oh,
friends?" I didn't have this scene, Lauren. We went right to popular, to the song.
mhm.
Um, and I said, they're going to dance together and they're going to bond as friends. And he looked at me like, and he said, it's not enough. He said, Winnie, they go back after they dance together, they go back to their room. You should write a scene. He literally just said that to me. And I thought, oh my God, thank God for you, because then I realized I realized like that, they've been to a late night dance. They're finally talking. They've been living together as enemies. Now they want to like bond. Now they want to tell each other secrets. So it could be all about, I'm going to tell you a secret and I'm going to tell you a secret. And that's not really a secret, but that kind of late night talk, right? And it gave me such an opportunity to exposit Elphaba and
Mhm,
her
mhm,
pain, her secret burden. There's this beautiful, I think, quote from the Talmud or maybe just a Jewish prayer. And it says that when you're in a crowd, remember that everyone carries a secret burden.
mhm, mhm.
And I think about that a lot, just as a person, but also as a writer. What's the character's secret burden? And this was my opportunity also to show Galinda in a true light of friendship because
Yeah.
she said she has insight and she says to her, that may be your secret, but it doesn't make it true. And
Ooh,
that's thematic
yeah.
because what is true and what isn't true is part of our huge overriding theme, right? Like
Mhm,
what we think is true
mhm,
about the story of Oz, about the wizard, what we think is true, what isn't true is a lot of what Wicked is about.
mhm.
So that's that's what, and then Javier was asking before about how do you get into a song.
Yes.
Then we knew popular already existed because I used to go right to popular. So I knew what the song was going to be because we had already decided, she tries to make her over, she tries to make her popular. So so I knew popular. So it's like the natural thing was like, oh, the sun's coming up and it's a new day and it's going to be a new you.
Wow, that is why we do script breakdowns. That like, boom.
I'm so relieved to actually have an answer to the question because a lot of this stuff, I think people will understand as we're all writers is that, it happens in the combustion of the conversation of the collaboration, or it happens, when you're taking a shower, like after that conversation and a thought enters your head, but you don't really understand, there's so much, the power is mysterious.
Yeah.
It's not like conjuring up a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? That's from Act 2. So Javier doesn't.
That quote is just whoop, right?
Yeah, he has no idea what I just said. That's okay.
So yeah, that stuff goes over my head sometimes.
It's okay. I totally get it. It's so all right.
We're at 90 minutes, you guys, but we're not going anywhere. We got to get through the rest of this.
Can I just go to the bathroom though, just for a second?
Yes.
Welcome back.
Well, the chat is on fire right now with how much people are enjoying this. So
oh, I'm so happy. I really love my fellow writers and I love feeling like I can be helpful. I mean, it's really a good feeling.
Yeah.
She's back.
Everyone ready to go? We'll get back into it.
Oh, people are so sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, so where were we?
Okay, so I think we're gonna jump a little bit ahead to page 78.
Okay.
So this is where
the poppies.
So let's talk actually. I think go back to page like 72, Dustin, just so everyone's kind of clear on where we are in the script.
Right.
Also, like Dr. Dillerman getting taken away in the movie, I felt it was a lot scarier than it is.
But it's the same. It's scripted the same. Interesting.
Yeah, and
the same.
In the movie, you have the addition of the poppies, which I assume is something that might pay off later.
Well, I mean, I think it was about, honestly, it was about, first of all, we went through so many different possibilities of what happens, what spell happens when she gets upset in that situation. But we stumbled into this idea, which got cut, that they went on an adventure. See, Stephen and I really wanted to do a thing. We really tried to do a thing where you saw that that became a fivesome. He even wrote a song. We had a whole section where it was the five friends, and he wrote a song that obviously is a trunk song now. It's not usable. I mean, it's not something he's going to use anymore, but it was all of them going on an adventure together. And at the end of that, they realized that something had happened to Dr. Dillerman, and we had a whole other thing. And we were going to do very differently than it is here. And then we wrote so many versions of that, and we ended up going, with John's help, we ended up realizing we have to go back to how it is on stage. We went very far afield, and then we did write this section. I did write a whole scene where they go off and they pick poppies together on a hillside. You may have noticed that. Well, they had like a little montage of friendship, right? They had a montage of friendship. I believe that was all cut. And then but that's why she has poppies in her. Got it. But we established the poppies with Dr. Dillerman early on. When she helps him pick up the poppies, he spills them when he's upset in the classroom when he first sees animals can be seen and not heard. So she knows that he loves poppies. So it was easily I understand now why John cut it. It makes so much sense because you already know. You don't need to see them go out and pick poppies. You know that she loves Dr. Dillerman and that she admires him and she knows he likes poppies. So he has said to her, they don't, doesn't he say to her, they keep me cheerful in these dark times?
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something that we came up together, Dana and I, because I wanted to bring poppies into the story because poppies are this important thing in Wizard of Oz movie. I was always looking for opportunities to bring little references, little, I guess people call them Easter eggs, it just was it's a fun and evocative thing to do, to bring moments, tiny images from that movie into our movie, because we're part of an American legacy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we wanted, we were never not thinking of that, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then jump on a little bit ahead to page 78. So basically we noticed this dialogue is very like Hepburn and Tracy Sparks. It's got that kind of and there's also not a single line of description. It just boom, 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 back and forth, which we love. And so just some of the dialogue is really good, like on page 79. I happen to be genuinely self-absorbed and deeply shallow. No, you're not. You wouldn't be so unhappy.
Yeah.
And then we also love the line on top of page 80 where she says, I better get to safety.
He says it. He says it.
Right.
Right.
He says, I better get to safety because she touched him, and he's all rattled. And the thing is, Javier, if you had seen the musical, which you have not, you would know that this is exactly the dialogue from the musical. Exact.
Yeah, we just thought that whole back and forth is just, I mean, so well.
Well, there is a tradition of, that goes back to Shakespeare, of, when people are meant for each other, a romantic couple, so to speak, or when they're attracted to each other, that they argue.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We're doing that with Galinda too. In other words, the whole idea of loathing was based on this idea that I did come up with, which was, I said, Stephen and I were struggling with that moment. Like, what's that moment going to be? And I finally realized, like, when you meet someone that you take an instant dislike to, it's often like, it's as intense as falling in love.
Yeah.
It's like falling into hate. It's like you meet someone, you have an irrational dislike and you can't control your feelings, and that's akin to falling in love. And I was saying this to Stephen and he loved it. And he was like, oh my God, it's going to be like a love song, but about loathing. It's like, I love, and I was like, I was even saying, pitching, which he loved, the idea of like, sometimes when you hate someone, you really love to hate them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just the way people watch a show,
Yeah.
and it's their favorite thing to watch, but they hate it. It's like that hatred can feel so good. And that was the whole inspiration for loathing. So we're doing it there, but also here, it's a play on the same idea. It's that
to the I'm not that girl, right?
Yeah.
Right.
What? Because once she's touched him,
right,
she can't like pretend. First of all, he helped her.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like, she's not used to that.
Mm-hmm.
And she really, let's face it, this is again thematic. She really had a very strong, made a very strong decision of what he was.
Mm-hmm.
And he's breaking that open. I mean, she had discounted him as a rude, thoughtless person. I mean, you could say that she was probably attracted to him from the moment she saw him, and that was her defense.
Mm-hmm.
But she really thought of him as this, and here she's working that out for herself, and she's saying out loud, no matter how superficial, and I forget the line, that you pretend to be, you obviously can't be that, and that's thematic for us. That's all about what you're pretending to be, what you're presenting to be, what the wizard seems to be, what Galinda is pretending to be. It's all about presentation versus looking beneath the surface, looking at someone in a deeper way, looking at a situation in a deeper way. So this is all thematic.
It almost goes back to the water upside down.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
And you know, this is not just me. I'm saying I think all of our artists working on the movie, including, of course, the two incredible, you know, Cynthia and Ari, and also the whole cast, but let's just take Cynthia and Ari. We're all working with this all the time. This idea of presentation versus what's beneath, what's underneath. All the designers, you know, and John himself, obviously.
Right. Let's move on a little bit. I want to pause on page 84. This is where Elphaba gets an invitation to meet the wizard. Let's see, go down to 84. So this is just, and then we see Madame Morrible shows off her ability to control the weather. But we were just wondering about this. What would be your response to the viral fan theory that Morrible caused a great drought that caused everybody to turn against the animals?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot. I was thinking of trying to figure out a way to have that be true.
Yep.
And using it. That was something I've been thinking about actually for years.
Wow.
But I wasn't, and I think I pitched it a few times to Stephen, and I think I may have, I know I pitched it to Stephen, and it didn't really, it didn't end up being something to script. I can't even explain it any better than that.
Yeah.
But it didn't end up being something that we scripted. I think if you think that, I sort of think that. Because it could make sense, because it could be that the wizard, you know, was looking for help from her even back then, you know, and maybe that's how she got involved with the wizard or whatever. But it became too complicated and too much backstory, and we just didn't script it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to believe it, but it's definitely was something I was playing with. Yeah. But you know, not everything fits, you know.
Right. So then I think 89 and 90, Dustin, let's see.
Yeah, I just see this in the chat, and I just want to say, not only was part 2 written like while we were writing part 1, like in other words, we wrote the whole thing together, you know, in successive months, but part 2 has been shot, and he is currently editing it.
Wow. So yeah,
it was shot when we shot part 1. In other words, it was all one big shoot.
Right.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So the train station on page 89 to 90. Basically, I think at the bottom of page 90, go through, find Morrible watching from afar.
Yes, and all of this was cut. I mean, it was shot, it was cut, I believe.
Interesting. Yeah, it's because we're talking about the script, like, you know, registering the power Galinda has to charm to affect the crowd. What were you going for in this scene? Like, well,
first of all, this isn't just a scene; it's something that almost killed me. I mean, this is a sequence where I was trying to incorporate many aspects of the plot, and I believe he shot pretty much the way it's written, and he discovered, and I completely concur, although it was, I just didn't realize it, you know, obviously, we just, less is more. We didn't need all this, but I did, you know, what I was thinking was I wanted Morrible to notice that Galinda has, and she becomes Glinda in the scene, has this strong effect on people, that people look up to her, that people want to be like her, that, you know, I wanted her to see that about Glinda. You end up not needing it. You know, at the end when she goes, that creepy moment, which I think of as almost like Mrs. Danvers, when she walks over to Glinda and Glinda is in shock, and Glinda is in mourning, really. And she then realizes that her dream is coming true, but in a way that she never could have predicted or wanted. And she doesn't know what to feel, and she knows that Morrible has no respect for her. But she also knows that Morrible's going to maybe be an answer to what she thought was her prayers, you see.
Right.
And so it's such a complicated moment. And you know why Morrible comes over to her, because she wants to use her. She wants to use her in some way.
Right.
And it's not, I used to think, obviously, when I was writing it, that it would really be helpful and needed to have Morrible witness Glinda's effect on people. But, you know, it ends up that you don't need it. You completely understand.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So let's move to page 92. I think it's really sweet in the movie, by the way, when Glinda, her name's Glinda now,
Yes.
jumps onto the train.
Well, I had to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, that to me was a movie moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, this is why we're making a movie, right? So she can jump on the train like that. I guess you would call that a trope, right?
Yeah.
That whole idea of running alongside the train and the person is saying, come on, come with me, come on. And I think you've seen it in movies so often, but you haven't seen it quite like this.
Right.
Between two young women who are friends. And there was just something powerful to me about evoking that movie image.
Yeah.
And it just lent excitement. So I had that for a while. I wanted that.
Yeah. Can we talk Dustin, just give us like a slow, elegant scroll. But can we talk about One Short Day and just kind of like translating that for the movie? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, we knew it was going to be bigger. You know, we knew. I've talked already about what we wanted very much, which was I was looking for a way to set up the Grimmery. I wanted to set up the Grimmery, and I wanted to also, this is something that went back to Stephen Daldry. He and I were often talking about propaganda. And what I wanted to create was some kind of, you would see the story of the wizard, like at one point we had them going to a museum, and the story of the wizard was sort of depicted in the museum, like in different exhibits. And it kept growing and evolving into what became this musical number. Then I thought we could do it as a play. And you know, it's like it's being enacted, you know, the arrival of the wizard is being enacted. And then, of course, Stephen Schwartz says to me, well, I mean, I should musicalize that play. And I was like, I had written it as a play. And it's very similar to what it is musicalized. And it had two purposes for me. You know, it had the setting up of the Grimmery and the setting up of the propaganda of the wizard. And the way he shot it surprised me a bit, because I always thought it was going to be more well, it starts off sort of presentational, but then the whole crowd, like the part that I play in the crowd.
You're gonna ask about that. Yep.
Well, this was John's idea to have me and Stephen. He wanted us to have cameos in this moment. He wanted Stephen to say that line, the wizard will see you now. And he wanted me I had scripted this line for an actor, to say, what is it I say? Like, it looks, look.
Scroll down to it. I think it's on the bottom of 97.
He must be a wizard.
Yeah.
He can read the book. He must be a wizard. And see how it says WH?
Yeah.
because John had pitched that would be me. First what we thought, maybe Stephen is this, and then we realized, then John said, no, Stephen has to say the wizard will see you now. So, but my point is that he made it very experiential, where suddenly the crowd around them, some of them are actors and some of them are the crowd, if you see what I mean.
Right.
I'm not sure if people understand that, but I'm like a plant in the audience, you might say.
Oh,
do you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
But,
yeah.
But I guess you could take it anyway, the other way, and it would still make sense. Like, in other words, I could be an excited audience member saying, oh, and this is what happened, but what in our mind was, what was in my mind writing it was, that's one of the actors going, oh, he can read the book, he must be a wizard. And that's we're enacting what happened. And that is what happened when the wizard landed. But obviously he can't read the book. He's saying Omaha, which is the name of the city he's from.
Right.
So I'm hoping that, and just a little what do you call, little tidbit is that my father was born in Omaha. But of course, I believe in the original L. Frank Baum, the chat will tell me, but I believe in the original L. Frank Baum books, the book, the Wizard of Oz, I believe he's from Nebraska, I think. Or it's either Kansas or Nebraska, but I think he might be from Nebraska.
I think it's Nebraska. I'm not 100%.
I think that's why I thought of doing the Omaha. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. Let's move on to page 100.
Oh yeah.
So when they approach the wizard's palace and the Hall of Grandiosity, so one of the best new moments in the movie is, when Elphaba stops walking, frozen in fear. Glinda takes her and looks her now. And she tells her, "Listen to me. You can do this. You can do anything." Talk about why this was added.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted this very much. I wanted to make sure I was redeeming Glinda's character all the time. I wanted to make sure that it was felt that you could feel that Glinda was a really good friend, because the way Glinda starts is the opposite of that. And part of the transformation, part of what happens of the combustion when these two meet is that they change each other's lives. And one of the things that happens to Glinda is that she discovers what true friendship is. And I wanted to show her being a true friend. And I also really, really, really wanted Elphaba scared, because that was another thing we discovered for the movie, is I really wanted it to be clear that she doesn't feel in control of her powers. She doesn't feel confident. She's not sure she can make the wizard want to work with her. I didn't want it to be like, well, I know I'm magic and I can just do everything. I mean, that's what she even says to Morrible, I don't think I'm ready, or something like that. And that's why Morrible says, don't be so pessimistical, which is a line I happen to love. And I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of that for the play. Couldn't believe I hadn't thought of that for the play. It's such a wonderful, perfect word, Ozian word, for that moment. But anyway, does that answer your question, Javier? It was very important for me. And by the way, I had a lot more, as you can imagine, I think. Everything was a lot more at one point or another, if you know what I mean. But I had a lot more of that sort of thing. And then a little goes a long way. And I began to realize this is all I really needed, was her walking frozen with fear and Glinda seeing how frightened her friend is and just taking that moment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because, Elphaba, just because she's brave doesn't mean she isn't frightened also. I mean, that's what it means to be brave, is that you're frightened and you do it anyway.
All right. So also, just a description of the wizard at the bottom. This is the wizard. Let's see, wait till he gets there. This is the wizard, extraordinarily ordinary, with an inner motor, like he's being elected, but still trying to get your vote. We just
great.
great.
Well, that is me, and that is definitely how I see him.
I mean, yeah, totally.
And I love Jeff Goldblum, you know, as a person, but also what a great wizard he is. He's so perfect, I think.
Totally.
I think he's so perfect.
Another thing, onto page 103, another thing that really deepens this visit to the wizard is when they're looking at the model of the Land of Oz.
Yes, well, that originated with Daldry. I'll just reveal that here. That he had this idea, and it came out of the fact that he and I would have these conversations, and I really, really wanted it to become clear somehow that the yellow brick road didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Because that was something that I felt could be happening in the second part of the story, if you see what I mean.
Totally. And this moment where she gets the tiny replica of herself, and
yeah, I did come up with that because I wanted something to it was I was looking for something that, you know, that could trigger her, you know, that would be so tempting, like, this is going to be my future. My future could be like right here with you. And then, and also home is a very important word for us. You know, in the Wizard of Oz movie, there's no place like home. Elphaba never felt at home in her home, ever. And just the idea that the wizard is offering to make this place your home was powerful to her. And I used to have much more, I don't know if it's in the script anymore. I mean, it's definitely not in the movie as cut. I used to have much more of her, I set up somewhere, I used to have it set up that Glinda thought that her desire, you know, like it says in the song, that her heart's desire was to have him degreenify her.
Yeah.
I sort of did it subtly, but I think I did it. But I think that because we're following her, and we do have that wonderful line in the song early on, you know, I'll degreenify, you know, if I degreenify you. And of course, that's not important to me, but why not? You know, yes, I'll reply. And it says a lot about what she's self-conscious about and what she thinks might make her life work.
Right.
And then I very much wanted at this moment, it's what we don't have on stage, you know, a real sort of decision. I mean, it's different on stage, but a real decision to turn away from this thing she thought she wanted and really like create the moment when she realizes and you see, I have this, I don't think we do it in the movie. Does she look at Dr. Dilliman's spectacles? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, but I mean, I scripted it on purpose, but you know, he was right. You don't end up needing it to follow her thinking. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I scripted it because I was insecure. Would people understand what's at stake for her in this decision? And I also loved the fact that she had held on to those spectacles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great script moment. Even if you didn't, it's a great script moment.
I love it. But, you know, he ended up cutting it out. But I mean, it obviously informs the moment, I'm sure.
Yeah. So let's move. I just want to note on page at the top of, I think it's the top of page 106. Yes. When Morables come in with the Grimmery, Elphaba, having been so pessimistical before, actually shows, like, you know, she asked to prove herself, which I think is like kind of the final step in that arc.
Yes.
Yeah.
She has to prove herself, and she does it out of this desire to belong, you know, to belong, to please him, for his approval, to be good enough. And that's everything that she then renounces in Defying Gravity.
Yes. And I also want to note, we'll jump, you know, a few pages ahead to I think it's 110. I think one of the most powerful lines in the script. Keep going. There it is. Elphaba, like after she you know, reads from the Grimoire, the monkeys sprout wings. And she realizes Elphaba stares at both of them, seeing with new eyes, and then almost against her will, she starts to understand that the two people she most admires used her. Ooh, that's powerful. Yeah. Yeah.
And then she says, read it, cast a spell.
Yeah.
And it's just a little slightly elongated from what we have on stage. In other words, she never says, read it, cast a spell on stage. She just says, like, you can't read this book at all, can you?
Yeah.
You know?
Let's see, where are we now?
You know, John talked with us a lot about like breaking down this moment to make sure that we're following her thought process.
Yes.
And so that's why I added like little tiny additions of dialogue that seem very small, but there's more. Again, this scene goes very fast on stage. You will attest to that, Lauren.
Yes. Yes.
And so we sort of slowed it down a bit. I mean, not just a bit.
Well, I mean, you kind of slow it down, but it still has that like gut momentum. I mean,
it has momentum for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying we broke it down a little so that you're sort of in her thought process, I think, with a little more depth, which is what we wanted, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're seeing her make the connections, understand what just happened to her, understand what just happened to her life. And, you know, it's coming upon her like with more, sorry for the pun, but gravity, you know, it's landing on her.
Yeah.
I mean, it does on stage as well, but it's slowed down. And so because it's slowed down, you can follow the emotion of it, I think, a little more depth.
Yeah.
Let's do page 114.
I like this comment. I thought she really desperately still wanted to be degreenified, but she realized she wanted fairness, justice even more than her own selfish wants. Absolutely. But I think, yes, absolutely. I think she stops wanting anything but justice. Exactly. And fairness. She just can't anymore. Yeah. Because when she's faced with, she still believes the wizard can do anything, you know? So when she's faced with that moment, what's my heart's desire? She just can't be selfish. And yeah.
So on page 14, can you talk a little bit about adding the hot air balloon? There it is.
From the very beginning, a million years ago, in the late 60s. No, I'm kidding. But when I was first writing this, like 10 years ago, I had her come upon the hot air balloon, but both of them, because I'm thinking, you know, when you're if you're in the attic of his palace, it's like his storage space. Right. And there's the deflated balloon, which was, you know, I thought it would be a great image. And so that's what that is. But of course, John too, with his brilliance, he took that balloon and oh my Lord, see that this whole sequence is John Chu.
Gotcha.
Like I had an action sequence, but it wasn't quite like this. It wasn't quite like this, and it wasn't I had an action sequence of them running through the palace, but I didn't have this incredible thing with them getting onto the balloon and then firing it up and then catching fire. And
yeah, that's pretty awesome.
It was awesome. Yeah.
So then page 116. So this is where the girls find themselves in the attic and are so full of passion and adrenaline. They start to sing, but then it's interrupted, right? Because the chilling broadcast of demonizing Elphaba, this distortion, this repulsion, this wicked witch. Like if you're watching it, you know, even just in the script, it just sends chills down your spine. And
this is in our play exactly like this, Javier. This is the moment it's exactly replicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just has that effect. And especially like now, how you can turn somebody's image so quickly.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
It's really scary.
And there's every reason, you know, she is different. She is green. There's every reason to want to distrust her.
Right.
And now an authority figure is telling you to hate her and to hunt her.
Absolutely.
And
so brilliant.
So then we get to 117, and I just kind of like think about this where it's like in screenwriting when they always say like ask yourself like what's the worst thing that could that could happen to your character. I feel like this is like, you know, finally starting to get what you want, having the people you idolize betray you, and manipulate the entire country into thinking you're a wicked witch. Like that's
bad.
That's pretty much it.
Good.
But like what she does next, like when she's at her lowest point is when she literally chooses to defy gravity, which is why I think like
it's when she comes into her own true self.
Mm-hmm.
It's when she comes into her own true self. And the discovery we made in writing this together, working on this together, once John said, I believe in these two, that it should be two movies, is he helped us to see, or maybe we all came upon this together, I can't remember, that the whole first movie is Elphaba coming into her own true self. That's the journey of the whole first movie. And that the second movie, of course, Elphaba is hugely important, but it is Galinda's actually achieving her own true destiny. Okay. It's Galinda's journey of coming into who she was meant to be. But the whole story, you know, tells the story of two young women who both discover through their friendship who they were destined to become. Okay. Yeah. But I'm just saying it helped us to think, to understand that it made sense for there to be two movies actually, because they're really, do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then of course on page 119 we have you know, like the best line, quick, get on.
That's one of my favorite moments of ever, because you know it's a I guess you call it like a sliding doors moment when you think, well, wait, what if she did get on, and what if they became a team, and what if they fought injustice together? I mean, it's a whole other story. But she can't get on. That's not who she is at this time.
Right.
At this time in her life, she cannot possibly live that out.
Right. And it goes back to the train where she did get on the train. She did grab her hand.
Yeah, but she got on the train to meet the wizard.
It's just
she didn't get on the train to become a resistance fighter and be an enemy of Oz.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I think one of the most moving parts of the movie for me was it's on page 121 or 120, I don't know, where you know, we're on stage, you know, she just kind of like rises into the air. Here she falls off the building and has an encounter with,
I thought for a long time, even pre-John Chu, that it would be interesting. I had this thought in my mind that it would be interesting if Glinda thought she was going to kill herself. That if Glinda thought that she was I used to have a line, I guess it's gone, but I used to have a line where she said, Elfie, you know, you have everything to live for, like afraid that she was going to end her life right at that moment, actually. And I think that morphed into the idea of that she has no idea if the broom is going to save her. She really doesn't, but she is literally, like it says in Stephen's amazing song, she's going to take that leap. She's going to leap. She's going to leap into the unknown. So it's not about, I'm going to kill myself. Like my idea was always, Lauren, it wasn't that she was going to kill herself. It was that Glinda thought that might be what she was doing. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it still sort of plays that way a little bit. I'm not sure, but
I think so.
But I sort of inserted that somehow into the DNA of this moment. But Elphaba takes a leap. She takes a leap into her future. She takes a leap into herself. She takes a leap into the unknown. And then it was John who really discovered this idea, so fucking cool, you know, of hearing those voices as she's falling, hearing the taunts come back, hearing her, you know, and then her child self. That's John Chu. I did not think of that. I wish I could say I had. But
It's
I
a great
do think,
payoff with the small green hand.
well, yeah, but it's like, I think I mean, I don't mean to tell him what he was thinking, but I think, you know, he was taking that from that moment that we built in the beginning of, you know, of the little green girl holding the book, you know, but anyway, he had this great idea that she would see herself, because I guess what he was doing, well, it's so fabulous what he did. But what I was thinking was just simply that it was much more simplistic. It was suddenly like she realizes that that her enchantment worked, that the broom, you know, that's how I was picturing it until he said this to me one day on the phone. And I think I just got tears in my eyes. I was just so overwhelmed. And I just,
That's
amazing. But you
it's
can still
amazing.
see your DNA there, where she thinks that she's trying to kill herself because Glinda goes, Elfie, no.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. That's what I meant by Elfie, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to have literally the words, you have everything to live for, but I took that out.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how little signs are left.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's how it is often, right?
Right, exactly.
Sometimes what ends up being left is just enough. You know,
Right,
it's like you didn't need more.
So then 122, I think, in the middle, Elphaba, so she's soaring high. Let's see, we'll wait to
well, we built this very carefully with Stephen Schwartz. You know, and John, you know, John and Dana both suggested, let's see Oz, let's go back and see where everybody is. And I think Mark Platt also, because it had to do with setting up the next movie.
Right. Yeah, because she takes her into an embrace, like a welcome to the dark side.
Well, then take her into embrace was my thought always, because as I just described it, I described it as a Mrs. Danvers moment. I don't know if you know that reference from Rebecca. It's chilling. It's just a chilling, intense moment. And I always wanted that Glinda is like, she has no idea what's next and how bad could it be. She might even be arrested. I mean, she doesn't know what's in store. And then this awful embrace that means she's safe, and not only safe, but that she's going to, what I said before, that she's going to be given everything she was hoping for in a way that feels really weird and really upsetting.
That's amazing.
And it's the perfect setup for her next part of her journey. And then, you know, I think John always said to me, we've got to have a moment where she looks into the wizard's eyes, like defiant. And I think we have that. Yes, definitely. She's hovering midair. Yeah. Excuse me, because I don't always remember every version of, you know, what ended up.
Oh, a tiny bit, Dustin, like a tiny bit.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, it's all leading into, on page 123, the triumphant cry, which I'm not going to dare imitate here on Zoom, but
I'm sure not.
Yeah. And to be continued. Wow, we made it to the end. I feel like we wanted to wrap this up with like a we couldn't quite figure out the question we wanted to end with, but our communications person, Casey Parajan, helped us come up with this question, which is, after all of this, like, if you could go back to the very beginning of the whole Wicked process and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Because I really was, and I experienced a lot of nerves, a lot of fear. I had many moments of crucial self-doubt. It's going to be okay. And you know, it's gonna all, you know, just let yourself ride it. It's gonna work out.
I think all writers need to hear
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Let yourself write it.
Yeah, let yourself write it and rewrite it, because it's like, I love the comments, because, you know, what we do is, you know, nobody sits down and writes a first draft or a second draft or even a third draft and it's like it's all there. I mean, at least I don't.
No.
And this took so many drafts and so much work. But you know, it's worth it. It's the work that we all want to do.
Absolutely. Holy shit, this was amazing.
Well,
I'm so glad. I really love the beautiful comments. Thank you so much. I'm really touched.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope you have a blast at you're gonna go to the WGA Awards, right?
I'm going this Saturday, right?
Yeah.
This is Saturday. Yeah. Oh, I can't wait. Yeah. And I'm bringing my daughter and a friend.
That's wonderful.
Actually, my friend, who's a screenwriter, a wonderful screenwriter, Karen Lee Hopkins, just lost her home, as so many of our writer friends have. So I was bringing her as a way to bond with her and be supportive. And I'm really looking forward to the WGA Awards, just to see friends and see my fellow writers, and hopefully we'll have a really fun night.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And,
thank you.
And just thank you so much. And
thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thanks to everyone. I love you guys.
Yeah, thank you, community. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everybody. All right, talk soon.
Go eat some dinner. Bye.
Bye.